Welcome back to The Swing of Things, U.S. Rowing's podcast, produced by Row360. This episode is presented by U.S. Rowing's official partner, Willis Towers Watson, managing people, risk, and capital to propel the world's leading businesses forward. Learn more about WTW at WTWCO.com. In this episode, I sit down with one of the most influential figures in our sport, World Rowing's Executive Director, Vincent Gaillard. We discuss sports business leadership, rowing's position in the global marketplace, and Paris 2024 preparations. We also look ahead to the LA Games. Before we hear from Vincent, let's get the latest from our friends across the pond, Row360 editors Tom Ransley and Benedict Tufnell.
Thanks, Amanda. Since the last episode, we've been in Lucerne, Switzerland, enjoying the final Olympic and Paralympic qualification regatta, or FOPQR, as well as World Cup 2. Tom, what exactly is the final Olympic and Paralympic qualification regatta, and why is it so significant?
So the crews that race at Paris, they've gone through a selection process, a qualification process, and that starts with the World Championships last year. Since then, there's been continental qualification regattas. Then the FOPQR is the last chance saloon. It's your very last opportunity to make it into Paris. And there's limited seats, limited spaces available. So for these athletes, you know, this is their Olympic gold medal, really. It's the end of the road. It's either make it to Paris or you'll finish.
Yeah, there's absolutely no second chances after this one, and it does lead for some very dramatic, high sort of emotion. Like you said, this is, for most athletes, this is their dream. Their whole career, their dream has been to get to that games, to get to a games. And there was certainly some heartbreak for the US men's quad in particular. I think they just missed out in the final.
Yeah, that's right. Just over a tenth or a second separating them from, you know, fulfilling their dreams. So a real tough one to take there.
There was also some positive results. So I think US qualified 4 boats.
Yeah, they've got 12 boats going to the Olympics in Paris and 2 in the Paralympics. So in Lucerne, the men's double, the women's quad, the men's 8, all won their finals, and then the men's single also managed to get the final slot to Paris, which is actually going to be the most number that the US have had since London 2012, which is pretty cool.
That men's single as well, that seemed particularly impressive because, I mean, Ketil Borsch didn't manage to qualify. He's a seasoned Olympian, an Olympic medalist from Tokyo.
George Bourne, also hotly tipped from Great Britain, and as you say, the Norwegian Olympic medalist, being beaten by Jacob from the USA and Romania, who took the win.
And then hot on the heels of the FOPQR, in the same venue the weekend after, we had World Cup 2, which was the first time we saw the full kind of showing of teams from all around the world. We had the US there, New Zealand, Australia, etc., etc. So this was a big, important competition ahead of the Olympic Games this summer.
Kind of the first time a lot of the big nations have sent full teams and all at the same venue, as you say. And again, like the US were on a roll, like they produced fantastic results. 2 gold medals in the men's 4 and the women's double, and then silver in the men's 8, the lightweight women's single, and 3 bronzes as well.
Yeah, so some of the most interesting results for me were both the men's 4 and the men's 8, because the men's 4, that's obviously a very competitive field, big event. Great Britain has dominated for the whole Olympic cycle, and then that US men's 4, which has been relatively unknown, kind of just came through and put on an incredible performance to take gold. And the men's 8, they had to put back-to-back performances together because they'd just come through the FOPQR the weekend before, and then to have a strong showing there.
Yeah, it was 4 brutal races in the week, and that 4th one, you know, the final of Lucerne, they really went after it, but the Brits managed to take it. I think it's one of the fastest, highest percentages of the day. But yeah, they beat them on the Friday.
I wonder how much of that, as you say, they beat them in the preliminary race. The US beat the GB8, which has been incredibly strong this Olympic cycle. I wonder how much of that is down to the fact that the US will have got to Switzerland in their absolute peak form because they knew they had to win, had to come in the top 2 at the FOPQR to get that Olympic slot, whereas the GB men's 8 have already got their qualification from last summer, so they are more building up and peaking for Paris, so won't have been at the top of their game in the same way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's a really valid point. I also would add that I think perhaps the US were a little bit hard done by, or maybe overlooked after their 6th place in Belgrade last year. So, between the two, perhaps they're maybe over-punching right now and probably a little bit under-punching in Belgrade.
Could the US pull off a surprise upset could you see a Olympic gold medal coming from either that men's 4 or men's 8 from the US?
Big question. I think Kiwis obviously did it last time round, qualified at Lucerne and then went on to take the gold, but it's very, very tough to peak twice in the season. And the men's 4, the men's 4s seem to be blasted open at the moment, that event. So as you say, kind of big questions, tough to ask right now.
US women's 8 too, they're shown that they're up there, they're in the mix.
That's right, they got onto the podium at World Cup 2, so they beat the Australians. Yeah, slipped a few seconds behind Great Britain, and Canada were the ones on song, the reigning Olympic champions, coming out on top at Lucerne. So perhaps maybe a little bit, you still got the Romanians to come back into this event, and they won in the Europeans, so there's perhaps a little bit of work to do there.
The one thing we do know about the Olympics is there's going to be some surprises, there's going to be upsets, there always is. There's always someone who comes through and no one expects them and they win the gold. And it always interests me why it seems that at the Olympics, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems that you get those surprise sort of upsets more at an Olympic Games than any other world rowing event.
Well, I think it's definitely the big pressure event, and it's definitely the one that everyone's peaking for. I think there's often, people in different phases of their training and different cycles through the season. So, I think you just get some real, heart on the sleeve kind of races where people just go above and beyond, which is incredible to see. And then, sadly, it does work the other way where, people kind of fold under the pressure.
One small anecdote from Lucerne, I'm not sure how much we can read into this, but I was in the boat park after the heats on the first day, and Josie Verdonschot, we were chatting, and he said to me, mark my words, my men's 4 will beat the British 4 in the final. So he's obviously confident and believes that they're strong athletes.
In the Lucerne final?
Yeah, he called it on the first day. He said my 4 will... He didn't say they'll win gold, he said they'll beat the British 4.
You'll have to ask him what he reckons about Paris.
So that's the final Olympic and Paralympic qualification regatta wrapped up. The qualification for the Games is all done. We know exactly who's going to be there, who's going to be racing. We've had World Cup 2, which is kind of the big pre-event. World Cup 3, there won't be as many of the teams there. So this is it now, really. The next big it's Paris. And so tell me, Tom, between now and then, what are they going to be doing? How do they peak for that?
Right, so the Dutch and the British camps are super keen on altitude training camps. Other nations are going to be headed to World Cup 3 to get a little bit more racing in before the little bit of a gap, and then the Paris Olympics. And generally it's going to be some really tough miles, and then some sharpening up, and a lot of if not international races and high-end, top-end pieces to try and build that once every 4 year speed. One thing's for sure, it's going to be a lot smoother and easier than Tokyo.
Yeah, it's going to be nice to be back to a proper, fully fledged spectators, the whole works Olympic Games.
It's common across all the athletes we're speaking to, and some of the coaches as well. They're definitely saying it's going to be so cool to have all my friends and family, watching, and we're not going to have masks. We're going to do proper medal ceremonies. I think sometimes there's some of these athletes, they do feel they kind of lost. It's the Olympics, they lost even if they were there. So lots to look forward to, and we'll be there every step of the way.
I can't wait. We'll see you next time.
Au revoir.
Thanks, guys. That was Row 360's Tom Ransley and Benedict Tufnell. Now it's my pleasure to welcome to the show the Executive Director of World Rowing, Vincent Gaillard. Good morning, Vincent. It's nice to see you.
Good morning to you, Amanda and team. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today.
And not morning for you. Morning here in the United States. And what time? Where are you?
We are in Lausanne, Switzerland, the Olympic capital of the world, as they like to call it. And it is 1 o'clock. No, it's 2 o'clock. There you go.
Very good.
I got that one right.
Well, thank you for taking some time with our American audience today. For those who don't know you, could you give us a quick summary of your background and work, in particular in sports business and how you came to the role of executive director of World Rowing. And I think you just hit your 2-year mark. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep. I joined in January of 2022. So just about 2 years. Yep. And I'm new into the sport, as you know already, but so new into rowing, certainly. Where I come from about, let's say, probably about 30 years now in the sports management, the sports industry, in various capacities, in various roles, in various geographies. I started in sponsorship a long time ago. My first job was with a sponsorship subsidiary of a big American advertising company called BBDO out of New York. I worked for the NBA Europe for a couple of years. The NBA had an office in Geneva, Switzerland, a long time ago, where we were doing all kinds of things from commercializing media rights in Europe to organizing 3-on-3 NBA events and a few other things. So anyway, all the NBA business in Europe. I worked for Coca-Cola for 13 plus years, where I was in charge of Olympic and FIFA World Cup sponsorships. Worked in the US for a while, in Salt Lake City, of all places, for about 2 years around the Winter Olympics, and in Atlanta as well, at the Coke headquarters. And then a few jobs later, I ended up for 7 years as CEO of European Professional Club Rugby, which is the organization that owns the rights for the rugby club competitions in Europe. And then I joined rowing 2 years ago, new into the sport, and excited about the opportunity ahead.
So you talk a lot about coming to World Rowing with really decades of sports business experience, the NBA, Coca-Cola, the European Professional Club Rugby. You've spoken in the past about sports business models not being a one-size-fits-all. Each, in a sense, is really their own puzzle to solve. I was hopeful you might talk about how that puzzle solving is going with World Rowing in general. You know, you've been in the role for a couple of years. What about making rowing a sustainable sports business or sports community, if you will? Have you started to figure that out?
I have started thinking about it, and we've taken a few steps in that direction, but it's obviously a huge challenge and endeavor. No, I think it's fair. It's fair to say that if you look at the status of the sport globally, we might talk about the US later on, but let's say globally, it's not in the best of places. It's not necessarily a sport that's getting much more attention. I think it's fair to say it's going in the opposite direction, and so we are gradually having difficulties attracting new generations. Audiences are not necessarily going in the right direction. However, there's a lot to do. There's a big challenge ahead to keep the sport engaging, attractive to new generation, and exciting, effectively. So we need to transform somehow. We need to transform, I think, the image and the reputation of the sport. We need to transform the reach of the sport, and we need to transform the revenues of the sport, because here also it's not in the best of places. And so a lot of what we do today indeed is about trying to increase our reach, is about trying to transform our business model to make us more attractive to commercial partners, for instance, that will or broadcasters, or all kinds of media channels that will then allow us to reinvest into the sport and so on. So it's a big endeavor. And we've taken a few steps in that direction already. But we have, I think it's a good 10-year journey ahead of us before we reach a real transformation. But we're on it, let's say.
It is a journey. Yeah. You said in an interview, if you combine great entertainment with a real purpose and a solid business model, you have a great organization. Kind of 3 pillars of how to run a sports organization, where the quote unquote entertainment is a combination of viewers and participants of the sport at all levels, the purpose being the mission of the organization, and you just spoke to that, and finally the finding of a proper revenue model for the sport. How do we pay for this? I was wondering how that model, whether it's in the back of your mind or the forefront, is how is that playing out for you? In particular, as you just talked about, rowing, it's not growing around the world. It doesn't have many media rights to sell. should we be leveraging crowd fundraising or grassroots support models? It's something we think about on the national level here at US Rowing, and I wonder how you think about that at World Rowing. Media rights, revenue models. Are you having any, now that you've settled in and taken stock of what you've inherited? What are you beginning to see are the answers for revenue?
One thing is certain is we're, as of now, way too reliant on the Olympic revenue. 2 years ago, we were very, very close from the Tokyo Olympics being cancelled. And if that had happened, it would have been an absolute disaster for us as a federation. So that's the first thing, is we have to look at diversifying revenues away from the Olympic revenue. We have some of that already. We have revenue today generated by our, let's say, mostly traditional linear TV. And obviously that model itself is not going in the right direction. Mm-hmm. We have some revenue generating by some of our events and some sponsorship, but really 85% of it today is Olympics. So
really, that was my next question. So it's 85% is driven by the Olympics. Yeah. Okay, yeah. There's some risk there, huh?
Arguably, it's and if you look at the history, it's not such a great risk. But Tokyo was at risk, and if that had happened, then it would have been a disaster. So we have to do better, but there's no easy solution to that. What we have started over a year ago is a project that we've referred to as the commercial partnership / investment project, which we've taken very, very seriously. We've recruited Deloitte Sports Group, and an illegal firm out of London to really help us on that journey. And the journey so far has been about, one, defining a vision for what we're trying to do as a sport, but really starting to look at alternative revenue models. So, which effectively means, I think by very definition, looking at much more sophisticated partnerships or investment. Take an example, which is quite tangible and also partly US centered, is you now know, of course, that we have a new discipline on the Olympic program, mm-hmm. beach sprint rowing. And we have committed to create a new competition, a beach sprint league, which we hope to start before the Olympics, before LA. So let's say in 26 or in 2027. That we simply cannot do on our own. We're not equipped. We don't have the funds to be able to get that off the ground. So what we have started to do, and we've actually announced that at our Congress last year, we are working with a US-based company called Hydro, mm-hmm. To develop that league together with them. And in my view, we are much better off doing it with a company that comes from the rowing ecosystem, mm-hmm. people whom we know and who are in this for the right reasons, as opposed to, let's say, a random private equity that is not so necessarily involved with the sport or coming in necessarily for the right reasons. So that's one example, and there's a few others that we are, let's say, developing at the moment as well.
Shifting gears here for a moment, in an interview with Row 360, our friends and podcast partner, full disclosure, really back at the start of your tenure at World Rowing, they asked you questions regarding the challenges international sports bodies are facing. And so moving past revenue for a second here, and you described as one of your top concerns the need to radically improve the integrity of sport and safeguarding of people involved with the sport. And I remember when I first met you, I said, oh my goodness, here in New York. And, I sometimes think it's a lot to be responsible for the sport in one country. And here you are, the sport across the world. This is something we always say is most important to us at US Rowing, is safeguarding of all sorts and being welcoming, being attentive to issues of diversity, protecting our youth from abuse of various kinds. Can you describe for us how this value plays out to you in World Rowing's mission in particular? What are you doing and what's driving that work?
Yeah, the long and the short of it is it's absolutely fundamental, and it's a big part of what we do today. I think it's fair to say, first of all, that rowing as a sport in general is very, very well governed. We are actually very privileged compared to many other sports, certainly around us and some of our neighbors here in the Olympic capital, who've suffered from pretty serious problems in sports governance for the last decades. Rowing's never had that. So we're starting from a good place, where at least historically, we never had any big issues, big scandals, or whether from doping or anything. So we're in a good place. But of course, we have to safeguard that as well. And we have to make sure that we maintain that reputation and that we keep evolving with the times, I suppose, right? And the increasing demands of modern sports governance. And safeguarding is at the heart of that. Now, it's here also easier said than done, because the reality of the matter is, so everyone agrees that it is our responsibility as a sport to protect our populations. It is relatively easy to, let's say, raise awareness and educate our population about why safeguarding is important and what it is, by the way, in the first place, and why is it important. So raising awareness is relatively easy. However, then acting on or managing cases that arise around the world, that is a whole lot of a more complicated problem for us to manage, of course. And I must admit, today we're struggling with that. To speak the truth, it's very, very challenging when you're a Lausanne, Switzerland-based organization with a team of 20 plus, right, to really be effective at managing cases, whatever kind of case, but let's say safeguarding a case in a different culture, in a different country, in a different language. So we're grappling with that.
When do those cases actually escalate to world rowing? You know, from different countries. I don't know how that works.
It could be. There's cases that are relatively easy to manage when they happen around a world rowing event, right? So it's a world rowing event. It's clearly our jurisdiction. Let's say you have a volunteer or an athlete that is a victim of something, right? From the moment that victim reports through a world rowing channel at the event, for instance, or after the event, we can act on it. Sure. And here it's relatively easy because it is our jurisdiction.
Sure.
Right? So we have a hotline, we have a reporting mechanism for victim to confidentially report on what they have been exposed to. But when it is a rower, in a club somewhere else or around the world, not associated with a world rowing activity, it's a whole different story. And when you get involved with trying to understand how did it come about, and it's legally very challenging as well.
I'm sure. So we have the Olympics just around the corner. I don't know about you, but I feel like the time is speeding up as we head towards Paris. And I was hopeful you could tell us really what you're looking forward to at the Olympics in Paris. And something I ask a lot of CEO peers here in the United States, in not only just what's exciting for you, but what's keeping you up at night when you think about the Paris Olympics.
I have to admit, there's not a whole lot that's keeping me awake at night as it relates to Paris 2024. In general, and certainly when it comes to rowing, we're in a very good place. We are very lucky, first of all, but with the team that we have at Paris 2024, who know the sport very, very well. So we're looking forward to a great Olympic regatta and Paralympic regatta right after it.
Yeah, of course.
The Paralympic also going very, very well. Ultimately, I've spent much more time working on the LA 28 Olympics than I have spent on Paris 2024 since I joined the World Rowing.
That was my next question, of course. LA Games here on our own soil, which, needless to say, we're incredibly excited about. And I've of course, I have to ask you about and I'm sure you're so tired of this question, so we can keep it short. But do you know what it's going to be?
Why are we rowing on 1,500 meters?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We know, well, I know why, but right. For our listeners, maybe you should do a brief explanation. Yeah. And, I don't think there's concern coming from U.S. rowing at all on that front, but maybe a little bit about that. And then I'd love to shift over to something more exciting, which is beach sprints.
Well, the long and the short of it is, and that decision predates me. So it was taken by World Rowing probably a year or two prior to my arrival. But the long and the short of it is we were faced with a bit of a dilemma, which is either we row on 2,000 meters in a venue that is, say, 3 hours away from LA. So very far, very remote, difficult to access, requiring an athlete's village or an ancillary athlete's village, or being in the heart of LA, much more accessible, much more visible to, let's say, to the public in general, in an iconic venue. But the problem with that is the iconic venue has a bridge now, which it didn't have in 1928. And so we had to make a choice of either being in the heart of LA on 1,500 meters or 2,000 meters and far out. And so that's the decision that was made. It was seen as really going in a direction of what was a very clear preference for the organizing committee and for LA. But it also happens that many of us believe that it will give much more visibility to the sport by being where it is in Long Beach as opposed to anywhere else. And if you project yourself 4 years from now, so in July of 2028, we'll have rowing in two very, very different formats, right? Just a couple of 100 yards away in Long Beach, classic rowing, of course, at the Marina Stadium, and then beach sprints rowing north of Long Beach, just a few yards away. So that prospect of being at the heart of LA with both those disciplines is, for me, super exciting.
So that's a great segue into beach sprints, Vincent. First, for the listeners who aren't familiar with the discipline, can you tell us a little bit about beach sprints, and then how you feel about this being introduced as I think you just told us it seems like a positive, but the introduction in LA.
It's a really, really an exciting story. So first of all, beach sprint is a 3 to 4 minute head-to-head race involving a sprint from the beach, 500 meter row at sea, back, and a quick sprint to a finish line. Waves, currents, tides, winds,
sand, sprinting,
sand,
yeah.
Make the whole thing very, very exciting, very easy to understand. It's a straight knockout format. We are, by the way, have not increased our athletes quota, which was critical for the IOC. You know, they've kind of put a ceiling to the athletes quota because, again, reducing cost and complexity of the games, which are becoming too big. So we've managed to operate and to present beach sprint within kind of a quota maximum as a result of the lightweight rowing disappearing off the program. So off what was a, let's say, bad or not so good news, we made an opportunity. I think it's probably the best way to put it.
What has the feedback been from around the world on that change?
No question that the lightweight rowing disappearing off the Olympics was bad news for many.
Of course.
I think that's clear, and we certainly cannot say anything different. Here also, we had to respond to effectively a request from the Olympic Committee. They didn't see the benefit of lightweight in a non-combat sport, if you will, right? So, in fact, it's the only non-combat sport or the only martial arts sport where you have a lightweight category. But lightweight rowing will continue to exist across all of our events, world championships or otherwise, but unfortunately not at the Olympics.
Well, we agree with the positive on the beach sprints, and very much looking forward to it. It's starting here in the United States. There's a lot of enthusiasm for the discipline, and like you, we're hopeful that this will be a part of a growth trajectory for the entire sport. Beach sprints. Have you tried beach sprints yet?
No, I have
not. They made tried. You? No, neither have I.
Not yet. Not yet, but I will this year in Genoa. We have our World Championships in Italy in September, and I certainly hope to try.
Very good. Maybe we could try it together. I feel like I want to just be a boat holder.
Do you? Okay.
Yes,
okay.
I'll hold the boat.
Okay.
You get in.
The good news about this discipline, it's very easy for non-rowers to understand.
Yes.
Right? It's very easy to get, and really, ultimately, it's important for us, right, to be more accessible as a sport, easier to understand from, casual sports fans to hardcore rowing fans.
It's so true. We have a lot of friends who are athletes in our family, but who have never rowed, and they'll come and say, could I go race in the head of the Charles, or could I go get in that single? And we say, no, you couldn't. But when you get one of those great coastal boats, you can put anyone in to just try it out and start learning the stroke. And, it's so much more accessible, which is just such a positive.
Yeah, and you could make it a real mixed event, right? So on the out of our very small quota, by the way, it will be a quota of 64 athletes at LA28, so it's relatively small. It will be men's single, women's single, and a mixed double, which we think will bring something very unique to rowing that many other sports cannot do or don't want to do, but we are able to do that, which is also very exciting in terms of parity and gender equality and so on, in terms of making a real exciting event, basically. Right?
Yeah. Are there other sports that have a mixed gender event?
It starts, but a real mixed event, no, not very few.
No. I guess equestrian, but not really, because they're still competing individually.
You have mixed quotas across the board now, right? 50% men, 50% women, but very few actually mixed sports.
Where they're competing.
And men. Exactly, at the same time.
Yeah, I can't think of another that's unique and exciting.
I'm sure others will come, and it's not that hard to do after all, right? But many haven't taken that step, and we have, and it's on the most visible of platform, which is extremely exciting.
Yeah, very positive, very exciting. Listen, thank you for this time this morning here, this afternoon for you, morning here. We're so thrilled to have the opportunity to work with World Rowing and see you at events across the year. And I guess the next time is Paris for us all, the Olympics and then the Paralympics. And thank you for all that you're doing for all of us across the world in rowing. And you've taken on a large job. And thank you. And thank you for your time this morning.
Amanda, thank you very, very much to you. All the very best. Thanks for having me. Great to try and convey, or at least my excitement for all the opportunities that we have ahead in classic, in coastal, or in indoor rowing, because there's a lot more to say about indoor rowing, maybe at another opportunity. But maybe worth saying in conclusion that here also that brings huge opportunities for us. We now know that there will be an Olympic esports games around the corner. So a new form of Olympic Games organized by the IOC. And we certainly have an intention to be in it. And so, and that's probably just a couple of years away. So we're on that journey as well to try and put our indoor rowing discipline or sport into a new form of game, a connected game on e-games.
That's wonderful. And more to talk about very soon on that front. Thank you.
Great pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And that's all for this episode of The Swing of Things. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Next time, I'll be speaking with Rowing Australia CEO Sarah Cook. I hope you'll join us. Remember to like, share, and follow from wherever you get your podcasts. It helps others to find us. Please subscribe to make sure you don't miss future episodes. And thanks for listening.